Joining us right now, the king of North American soccer. Everyone follows him, and why shouldn't you? This guy knows it all. He understands it, and people follow him to get the latest info all over North America and South America. Ives Galarcep, Soccer by Ives. Ives, welcome again, my friend.
Hey, Anthony. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Pleasure's all mine. It's always a treat having you on, Ives. Let's talk about MLS. We're getting closer to the stretch run, closing in on the playoffs sooner than later. Let's talk about the Eastern Conference, New York City FC. Unbelievable run they've had so far. I love what they're doing in their second year. Talk about them sitting on the top spot.
Well, I'll tell you, the way their midfield has come together has been the real key for them. Obviously, Frank Lampard, everyone had him kind of left for dead with all the injuries, and people were writing him off as maybe the biggest bust in MLS history. And ever since he's come back, he's been a big part of the turnaround. Obviously, it's not just him, but credit to Patrick Vieira, the midfield that he put together once he put Anthony Iraola in the defensive midfield spot and Pirlo and Lampard in front of him. That triangle has been excellent. And then when you have Jack Harrison developing on the right wing, it's really given them a midfield that has the kind of balance that they really didn't have before.
Let's talk about Toronto FC. Watched the game Saturday, was in the box once again, and to me, it's not surprising anymore. What Giovinco was doing time and time again, Ives, is just ho-hum. Here we go again, electric goal after electric goal. And he is doing it with guys that haven't been in the lineup. We saw Michael Bradley finally come back in. Altidore finally coming in at the tail end the last few games, but not 100% healthy. No Johnson. On and on. All he does is score and really put the team on his back. Talk about this team and how dangerous they could be on the stretch.
I'll tell you, what really impressed me is the way their young guys came together in recent weeks. When TFC had all the injuries, that rash of injuries, when you talk about Bradley, Will Johnson, Jose Altidore, Irwin in goal, it looked like that was it. Like, it looked like the season could really collapse. And credit to Greg Vanney, he played his young guys, and the young guys stepped up, all over the lineup. Whether you're talking Jay Chapman, Hamilton, Zavaleta, obviously Alex Bono, a guy who maybe people had forgotten about as a really good American prospect or a prospect in goal. So now that all those kids stepped up when they needed them, and now that the injured guys are coming back, you're talking about a team that has depth. Greg Vanney, he believes in those young guys now if he needs to call on them again. And there's a real belief in that group that they can go far. And obviously, when you have a guy like Giovinco who can carry a game on his own, it just gives them that weapon that has to make them a serious contender.
I couldn't be happier for the Philadelphia Union fans, management, coaching staff, and players. I believe they finally will get into the playoffs, and who knows what they can do once they get in there. They're going for it. They're putting their money where their mouth is. They're making shrewd moves. They're making smart moves. I love what Philly is doing once and for all.
No, yeah, they've done a great job. And even before this summer window, they'd already done a good job with the draft picks that they made. Some of the pickups they made in Europe last winter, guys like Alberg, Ilsinho, who looked good, and now that they've just ran away with the summer window, adding Bedoya, adding Charlie Davies. I mean, it's a team. Not to offend anyone in Philly, but I still think they're a team that maybe next year's the big year for them because they do still have several young players. They do still have a group that is still kind of playing together. So I think this year, yeah, they'll get over that hurdle, get back into the playoffs for the first time in forever. But I think they're going to need this year of experience to set them up for next year. And then you have another winter window where Ernie Stewart can tinker with the roster. And I think next year's the year where you could really be talking about Philly as a title contender.
Ives, we talked about this at the beginning of the year. I talked with Jeff Carlisle of ESPN. I've talked to many guys, and I talked about Chicago Fire having a real important year ahead of them to get into the playoffs, recapture the fire of their fans, recapture that city, and they have done the absolute opposite, sitting at the bottom, and again, sitting at the bottom of the whole league. And to me, there looks like no hope. Some have said, yes, there's hope because they're starting to build something. I don't see it. Do you?
Honestly, I don't. And the thing is, they're a group that obviously when they hired Nelson Rodriguez and they hired Veljko Paunovic, you figure as a group, that as a collective, those guys are going to get a couple of years to build something, and that there was no rush, and that they could really take their time. And while you can respect that, at the same time, they really haven't shown enough signs that there's progress. And that's a huge blow to a fan base that has already suffered for so many years. When you come out of the gate trading away a player like Harry Shipp, who the fans absolutely love, a hometown kid, homegrown player and all that, if you make a deal like that, that all of a sudden speeds up the timetable in a way, right? It puts the pressure on you even more as the new regime, and they just haven't answered the bell. And I think part of the issue there is that you wonder how much money they're really willing to spend. And I know we heard about how they went after Drogba, how they went after Jermaine Jones. People tried to say they went after Bedoya now, which I don't buy at all, and I don't think they were ever really seriously in for Bedoya. But you look at some of the signings that they made, and these just feel like budget signings. And in this league, it's not easy to win when you're kind of shopping in on the bargain rack, so to speak. So we'll see if some of these guys pan out, some of the pickups that they made in the summer window. But for this year's a lost cause. And if anything, if you're the Fire, you need to play your young guys, the few young guys that you have, and then hopefully next year they can turn it around. But I just don't see anything changing this year.
Let's turn to the Western Conference. FC Dallas, unbelievable a season again in the regular season. They're doing it with youngsters. They're doing it with a couple veterans mixed in. They're doing it with a system. They're doing it with a belief. I've had on Fernando Clavillo on my show a few times. I just love the way he lives, breathes, and enjoys the game. And really, it trickles down all the way down to the players that are now on this first team. Talk about this team that I believe will get to the final this year.
Well, look, they're a very good team, and I believe I picked them to win. But the issue now, the big issue now, they sold Fabian Castillo. Well, I don't know if the team ever even formally announced it, but he's gone. And that whole soap opera, and just to be clear, I know some people want to blame FC Dallas for that. It's all Castillo. For me, Castillo wanted out. He asked out. He forced his way out. FC Dallas's hands were tied. They have one of two options. One is to just make the player stay and make it be miserable, and that doesn't do you any favors, or you just let them go. And that's what they had to do. But the problem is it dragged out so long. Now they won't be able to use the resources from that transfer to help them now. So you've all of a sudden lost one of your absolute best attacking players. You haven't been able to replace them. They have talent, no question. They're one of the top teams in the league. You can argue they're the best team in the league. My question is, can they really win a title do they have enough attacking superstar power to win a title? And I feel like in MLS you need to have that guy, the Robbie Keane type, or in the past, Shelotto in Columbus comes to mind. Those type of superstar difference makers. And Mauro Diaz is great, no question. But other than him, though, it's a lot of good players, but no game changers. So that's where I have questions about Dallas. They're going to be right there, and they could absolutely win it. But I think that's where I give the edge to a team like LA, who has obviously the big weapons, or even a CFC with Giovinco, right? Or NYCFC with Villa. These teams have those difference maker players that can turn a game on its head. And I just don't know if FC Dallas has that, and that could end up costing them.
If the season were to end today, my vote for Coach of the Year would go to Colorado Rapids, Pablo Mastriani. Ives, I don't know where you sit on that. This guy has done wonders. To me, this is the surprise team of the year. But it's no surprise. This guy knew MLS. This guy understood MLS. And he knew what he had last year, and he adjusted this year. He will have the pick of his choice where he wants to go if Colorado doesn't sign that big fat check for him at the end of the year. Your thoughts?
I'd still call it a surprise because let's face it, he looked pretty lost the first few years, and it was one of those deals where he was learning on the job. He didn't have experience, and Colorado gave him the time to kind of figure things out and learn as he went along. But that first year, he really looked pretty lost, just in terms of the way things went. Second year was somewhat similar, somewhat better, but it's all really come together. And I kind of agree. I agree that he probably gets the pick. You could also talk about Patrick Vieira, although I always thought that group would be better in year two when you had a full preseason of Pirlo and Iraola and a full second year to kind of revamp that roster. So for me, yeah, I agree with you. I would go Mastroeni over Vieira. I don't know if one great year is going to make Pablo Mastroeni be at the top of everybody's coaching list. That might be a little early, but we'll see what he does with this group. It's really come together so well, and they made it even better toward the end. You had a player like Sebastian Giovinco, who I think could end up being big for them. Someone coming off the bench, someone that gives them depth. I'm very interested to see how they do in the playoffs.
Well, the team that I'm interested to see if they get into the playoffs, the last team I want to talk about, and if they get into that spot in the playoffs, watch out. But when I saw them here in Toronto against TFC and they drew 1-1, is the Seattle Sounders. This team, to me, is on a freight train that can't be stopped right now. If they get in Ives, call me crazy, but I believe they could do a lot of damage and upset a lot of teams along the way.
They could make some noise, no question. As far as winning it, it's tough. I mean, if they get in, it'll be great. It'll be a great story. But let's not forget now that the playoff format has continuously changed to make it tougher and tougher for those lower seeded teams to kind of get through that gauntlet. I think the big surprise for me, is not that Lodeiro is good, because Lodeiro is a good player. We knew that. The big surprise is that he's hit the ground running. And a lot of times when players come into a summer window, their fitness isn't where it needs to be. They're kind of playing catch up with the rest of the league. You know, when you think about a guy like Pirlo last year who struggled at times because of that. But Lodeiro's, like, right off the bat, he's playing at an extremely high level, and that's such a game changer because he's exactly what they needed. But that's not all they need, though. I think if Roman Torres can come back and be 100%, that's huge for them because their defense has had its issues. And for me, I think people have kind of forgotten just how good Roman Torres can be. And you put him in there with a Chad Marshall, all of a sudden you're talking about a defense that's going to be real tough to deal with. So I agree with you. If they get in, they're not a team that anyone's going to want to play. When you talk about an informed Dempsey and Lodeiro and Jordan Morris, they're going to be dangerous. But the big question for me is, are there going to be enough teams that collapse for them to climb up? Because they're what are they, 8 or 9 points out still? So they're going to need at least two teams to just really fall apart. And that's not impossible, but it's not going to be easy. I mean, I think Vancouver's going to fall, but then who else falls? Will it be Real Salt Lake? They look pretty good their last game. So that's the question. Or Portland, is Portland going to stand firm or fall? So Seattle still needs help. They don't have their fate in their hands. They're going to need a couple of teams to collapse.
In the last minute or so, just before we let you go, Ives, we really appreciate your time. But I want to get your thoughts on something. I've been in the business 25 years plus. I worked in the old APSL, which I'm sure you recall, the Canadian Soccer League, on sports radio, and specifically in the game that you and I love, soccer, footy. And the conversation came up here this weekend in Toronto, and I agree with it, not just specifically to TFC, because they're not getting the respect that they deserve here with the mainstream media, but I believe MLS as a whole. And in certain cities, they are getting the respect, like a Kansas City, I believe, like a Seattle, and maybe a couple others, but that's it. But as a whole, they're not. Why do you see this? You got guys like you and I, Jeff Carlisle, others that love the league, cover the league, and want the league to succeed, but certain cities don't give them the time or day. Why, in your mind, is that?
I mean, when it comes down to it, I just think you have mainstream media leadership that's a little slow to realizing how much the sport is growing, and that's an issue that's gone on for years, right? I mean, I remember when I was coming up as a newspaper guy in New Jersey, I was pretty much the only full-time newspaper writer covering soccer in the state, and maybe one of the only ones in the country. And part of the reason for that is, these newspapers and these other outlets, TV outlets, they're used to the major sports, and until more and more fans are selling out stadiums, and more fans are making the TV ratings go up, until that continues, and readers let it be known that they want more soccer coverage, you're going to continue to have that. You're going to continue to only have a few markets that do it right, whether it's Orlando or Portland. Seattle, I think, has done a good job. Kansas City, in their market, they get a pretty good amount of coverage. But yeah, they're always going to be those issues. I mean, look at Los Angeles. I mean, the Galaxy, they're probably the best team in the history of the league, and they still struggle to get regular coverage in Los Angeles. So I mean, in New York, forget about it. I mean, you don't even have, like, the New York Times come out to Red Bulls games on a regular basis. So there's still those fights that are being fought. But as the league grows, as TV ratings go up, I think it's going to be too tough to ignore those things, and that's when kind of those old timers that don't get the sport, or those people who are stuck with the big three, big four, will start to realize that soccer really has made that jump.
Well, we appreciate you, Ives, and I'm not blowing smoke up you know where. You're a guy that we need out there because you play a big part all over North America. You're respected, you're trusted, people value what you have to say, people listen to what you have to say, and that's why we love having you on. But that's why I love following you, and I tell people, follow Ives. The guy writes from the heart, he's knowledgeable, and he cares about the game, and we need different guys like you positioned all over North America so we can get the sport we love more and more attention. Ives, God bless you. Thank you so much for making time, and continued success with Soccer by Ives, my friend.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It means a lot.